So then maybe I'll just rant on a little bit, and then we can turn it into a conversation from there. So I'm also a medical doctor, but I have left the bedside quite a while ago. And frankly, the beginning was tough. I've been so heavily judged by my colleagues. I had people who mentored me, protected me. It was great. The minute they heard that I was going to leave the bedside, the last thing they said was, "Oh, you've been bought by money," or you're letting your talents go to waste, or whatever it was. And with a very deep disappointment that touched me, because I didn't leave for the money. Of course, money was much better, but that's not why I left. And also, I think leaving is not always about running away from something because you're frustrated with the hospital. It can be that, frankly, you see your talent somewhere else, your place is somewhere else, and you hear that calling. And maybe you have a set of talents that you cannot use. Thanks. What do I pronounce your name? Solero? Yeah, it's, a lot of people have heard similar things. And there are a lot of, I find it surprising, frankly, because there are so many good things that you can do as a doctor outside. In Germany, doctors love to complain about this DRG-based payment system. There was no doctor involved in the negotiations, right? But then we complain afterwards. It's very natural that we have doctors working in microbiology and public health. We even know doctors who work in politics or in journalism. And that's kind of, I don't know, established or accepted, but not always, frankly. But the more you go into something that's considered to be a little bit more exotic or more in the industry, the more there's prejudice against it. And last time we had a session like this, there was an interesting conversation around the theme of identity. What does it mean to my identity? We often attach ourselves and our self-worth and everything to a certain image of being a doctor, which has a very strong history, which is great, but it can also be really limiting. And it can come with feelings of guilt and shame and whatever else if you end up stepping out. And I'm sure you've heard these things also, where people tell you, "Oh, but you studied for 6 years. Oh, society needs you. Oh, it costs so much." I have a very good friend. When I studied medicine, he studied pharmaceutical engineering, and he came up with an approach to develop a new anti-venom against snake bites that would be 10% as expensive, would last about 10 times longer, and would not create any anaphylactic reactions. And so I looked at him and I thought, wow, if you manage to pull this off, you will probably save many more lives than I ever could, no matter how many hours I work in a hospital. And I'm not saying something is better or worse than being a doctor. I love the clinical work. I have a huge respect for people who work there and stay in there. But the same is also true the other way around, right? It's not you are at the bedside that you are the only hero, right? Without these other people creating the tools that we have, we would not be able to do what we do, right? All of these routine miracles. And therefore, I think that if you find a space where you feel more at home, for example, in innovation, or for example, in something creative, journalism, I don't know, whatever it is, there's often a good chance that if you apply the same amount of ethics, time, energy, talent, and so on that you put into getting where you are now, chances are you will at least have the same amount of also social contributions that you can make as you would have done otherwise. So I'm always a little bit surprised at all of this pushback. And frankly, many years after I went through my career as a medical doctor outside patient care, more and more doctors wrote me and asked if I could take some time to talk to them about finding an alternative, because they felt like something is missing. There's some part of their talents that they cannot live out, or they felt like I expected something else when I went into this profession, and it was not what I had hoped. And so that's one aspect. And the other thing is people then also the ones that stopped talking to me when they heard that I left, I talked to them later on again, and suddenly they were quite positive, and they said, "Oh, now I understand you. I misunderstood you, and now it's fine," right? So it's probably nice to know that you can also make peace, or people eventually will understand where you went. So maybe I'll just pause there. I'd love to hear if there are any reflections sort of on this part, and then also the things we can talk about, and I can give a rant on all of these things, and Victor also has a lot of experience, but we want to make sure that's something that you are mostly interested in. So the things we can talk about is this journey of stepping out. We can talk about how do you step out, like what skills, what do you need to learn? More importantly, also, what are the things you need to unlearn? That's much harder to answer generically, frankly. We can talk about, is there regret of leaving it, or anything that you're particularly interested in that journey? How do I position myself? That there's a plethora of topics to touch on. I just would like to pause and see if there's something that some of you are particularly, chewing on at the moment that you're hoping to get answered.
I only maybe make one remark. So Sven already went on the dark side. He's a Darth Vader here. So but you don't have to go completely on the other side. You can still build your kind of portfolio career when you can, to a certain extent, practice medicine and then additional, not necessarily clinical things. So there's another road that you can also choose, not necessarily completely leaving the medicine. Yeah. But if you have any questions, please come up, because this is the idea of the whole thing. We don't want to bore you about, too much our stories. And if you have any questions, either to us directly or in general about how to approach change of career, just fire on. If it's easier, just type it in the chat. But we're not biting. We're just here to give you some kind of reflection and maybe a bit of advice to a certain extent. Yeah.
Okay, then I will start. Hi from Berlin. I would love to talk about how to get started, how to find a new way, and actually also about the most important things you should learn or how you can position yourself. Because for me,
Victor, do you want to? Should I?
Yeah, I think that's very general question. I would probably start with asking to try finding more specific ways or things that you're interested in, because for various other careers you may need different things. So the question is, have you been thinking about changing the career because you're finding medicine makes you unhappy and you don't find it fulfilling, or you're stressed or burned out, which is a push away from the career? So probably think about things that you're interested and you like, and then it's easier to give you more kind of specific advice. So I don't know if you have you thought about any particular non-clinical job that'd be easier, to give you more specific advice rather than kind of generalized idea?
Mm-hmm. So I'm just about to finish my master in public health, and there I worked lots of times in prevention and mental health. So I think this is really interesting, and at the moment I'm also a resident in obstetric and gynecology. So I would love to work in a field where I can combine this. So maybe on the entrepreneurship side. And those are my thoughts at the moment.
Yeah, Sven, you have some experience in public health as far as I am aware.
Yeah, and I think I can also maybe try to put it into some generic advice. So I think the first thing is, if you are in the hospital working full time, you already don't have too much time, right? So you're a little bit. Thanks to Lap, I'll get to the question in a moment. So you're strapped for time, for starters, right? And that means you have to figure out what are ways of doing that within your time constraints. There is, of course, the option of burning the bridge, which you actually never really are. It's always possible to go back, but make a clear cut and then move into something fully new. Many doctors I know will find that uncomfortable because it's too much uncertainty at once. And then you jump into a startup, for example, and you realize it's actually not what I wanted, or you're really focused on this one opportunity and sort of you double down on your risk. Maybe you have to relocate, or it might just feel like a too big of a jump. If there's something that was my way, more or less, I did have some softer engagements beforehand, but then I actually made a full-time jump. For many, that's not something that they look for. But we'll get back to that in a moment. The other opportunity is you try to half-time something. And I think a good way of doing that is, first of all, there are so many really cool online courses these days in areas that you can add on to. I mean, now, Nina, you're already getting a really good additional education and so on. So probably you're fine on that front, but could be that you discover, well, you need a little bit more digital skills or product management or data science or something like that. And that has become super accessible. The other thing is you can also just watch some YouTube or as you commute to your hospital, just listen to some audiobooks that are more startup related. I'm happy to give a list of things that I think are useful. And it serves a dual purpose. One is, of course, you acquire new skills. The other thing is you acquire a certain way of talking, thinking, and so on that makes you more natural, seem more natural to potential people that you then aspire to talk to, right? Because you know their language, you know the way they might structure their thinking because you've been reading or listening to the things that they also consumed. And socialization is a really important part to get yourself ready. And then in terms of seeking opportunities, that's, I know I'm stating the obvious, right? But both Google and LinkedIn have really good job search opportunities where you get frequent updates sent into your inbox. And it's not just about looking at these jobs, but I would really screen for what are the things that they're looking for in terms of soft skills and hard skills, note them down, and then constantly try and upskill myself towards that. And then, I mean, I don't know if you ever used the employer version of LinkedIn, but it actually sort of really screens people depending on the skills that they put in, and it searches for keywords in their profiles. So you have to do some optimization of your profile for the kind of jobs that people are typically recruiting for in order to be found, right? Just being a great person, if it doesn't really show on your LinkedIn that it's a match to that, the chances of you being found are quite low. But the most interesting jobs I've seen so far typically don't go through LinkedIn or Google. They typically go through word of mouth. So then it's a matter of socializing. And if you live in a city like Berlin, for example, it's fairly straightforward because the startup scene is quite active and you have a lot of digital health programs, etc. I would try to mingle with people that are not medical. So a business school, engineering school, meetups that are not so medical, but with people interested in medicine. So generally try to figure out. Today I spoke to a doctor. She's a psychiatrist, lives in Berlin, speaks perfect German, and she comes from Brazil. And my recommendation to her was maybe you can find Brazilian healthcare startups that just got Series A, Series B funding, so a little bit later stage, because they are quite likely to expand. And one of the areas to expand to, among others, of course, is Germany, right? Because it's a large country. And then there's Austria and Switzerland with the same language, and then you're within Europe. But that could be one thing. Also, England, of course, is interesting. But like, try to figure out what makes you unique beyond your medical stuff or within medicine that you can harness in order to make yourself the obvious candidate for somebody. And the beautiful thing to do in the beginning is you just try to join advisory boards, which means every month you give them a couple of hours of your time. In return, they either pay you a couple of hundred of pounds or euro or whatever per month, or maybe more, or they give you shares in the company, and you start to collect these kind of shares. You, frankly, often learn much more from them than the other way around, but they're happy to have your photo on their pitch decks and on the webpage, and that's how you start to build up credibility, right? There's also another good way is you just start to curate information. So probably, like, let's take Nina's example. She's probably reading a lot about obstetrics and about public health and about mental health and so on. And she might be picking up on interesting articles around digital health for women or something like that, and can end up just sharing these things on LinkedIn and, being magnet for other people who want to work in that field. And then after a while, somebody will start to reach out. I have more, but I don't want to keep ranting on. People are writing interesting questions.
I quickly just add a few words about Nina questions. So I think you already have specified pretty well what are you interested in. And the good news is these are probably very trendy kind of topics. So we consult a lot of startups, and many of them are actually in this space. So it's mental health, lifestyle medicine, preventative care. And I think you can actually mix, like, you know, there was a startup purely focused on mental health in pregnancy and around pregnancy. So like you said, you had this interest in obstetrics and mental health. So first of all, this is probably, you know, most popular topic at the moment in terms of many digital solutions and apps. So it seems like, you know, this is probably a growing market. The second thing I would probably agree what Sven was talking about, like building a network. So don't kind of restrict yourself to medicine. Open up yourself to other things. I, for example, last year been a couple of conferences completely not related to medicine, and surprisingly, you know, get some interesting conversations with people, and they're coming back to me. So don't underestimate the power of LinkedIn, which is maybe crazy. I am not a social media person, but if you are looking for a new job, if you only keep on applying on what is advertised, this is the small amount of those job opportunities. And the better way is, you know, by building, you know, relationships with people, which you could do, for example, by writing up some content on mental health or preventative medicine, putting it out on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and people will start getting in touch with you. At least that's my experience. I don't know if that helps, but just a couple of thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dolapo, how do you justify to a future employer outside of medicine that you want to leave clinical medicine? He says it makes him, he gives him the impression that he's being unserious or about to do the unthinkable. I would just be fully honest about how you feel about it, and I would not be ashamed about it. So what I say to people is, I love clinical medicine for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, patient interaction, for the honesty, because bodies don't lie, right? Unlike PowerPoint or spreadsheets. And so there's a lot, and I would not want to miss it, and I'm glad I did it. However, for me, I feel like the healthcare system, or the ones that I've known, and I've seen quite a few, are incredibly ineffective and wasteful. And I don't have the capacity to bear that. Like, I'm not very patient with these things. And I wanted to do something where I have much more leverage. And one downside of medicine is that often with this one-on-one interaction, it's just not scalable, right? So going back to this example of my friend who develops a new drug against snake bites, that guy has a lot of leverage, right? Because he creates something new that then can get productized. And so you can just say, and also I'm, if you want to do an MBA, probably you're very interested in managerial roles, or you like, you know, maybe to work a bit more in a creative side versus medicine, which can be quite template driven. Right? Here's your guideline A. The main job you have is figuring out who doesn't fit into the guideline, or maybe mixing 2 or 3 guidelines together because somebody's a bit more complicated. But by and large, you're often just following guidelines. Of course, you can do research, but then the research often is your part-time thing that you do after your 8, 9, or 10 hours of patient care. And these would be my reasons that I would give to people. And then I would connect it very specifically to that specific job. And I would say, look, you know, working for you, I get the chance of interacting with a machine learning engineer and maybe a software developer and a user interface designer. And I'm really curious about that diversity of thought, which I don't have in the hospital. I'm very curious about creating a product that can help thousands at a time. When as a doctor, even if I'm fast, I can do 20 or 30 or 40 patients a day. That's not enough for me. And also maybe there are some other aspects, you know, being more flexible, seeing the world a little bit more, whatever there is. But I think you've studied medicine, you know, like you've come a long way, you've fought hard. And I don't think you should excuse yourself for wanting to fight hard somewhere else, or maybe having an easier life. Also, that's also fine. Yeah, and I would say if anybody else wants to chip in on these things, right?
Please.
Not just be us talking.
I would say maybe only my approach is always to be honest, and then, you know, that'll be, you know, kind of straight in the face, telling what's brought me to the company, and my hope, you know, to influence things in a different way, maybe on larger scale. I think you should not give up on it based on rejection, because you will hear a lot of rejection. There's a lot of competition in this space. I mean, people are increasingly interested in undertaking, you know, alternative careers, and there's more and more people, and especially in digital health, I think it's very crowded. So it's not easy. It might have been, you know, before pandemic, there was barely any people interested in that. Another thing is, you know, this is completely new environment. So those roles are not defined. And I think people who are recruiting, they don't necessarily themselves fully understand, you know, how this market is changing and what benefits clinicians can provide. And again, highlighting maybe, you know, skills that might be particularly relevant to the job. But I think, you know, if you're doing MBA, they might that's kind of, you know, statement how serious you are. So this is a serious undertaking. MBA is not like, you know, another diploma in dermatology or something, like for it's, you know, it's long commitment, heavy work, costs a lot of money. It's not something that people who are not committed just take like that.
David, you asked a question that's top of mind of many people, so thanks for this one. The question basically is, should I finish a specialty, or should I work in a startup, for example, or health tech role full time, if that's where I want to be? And will I hit a ceiling if I don't complete my clinical training? So first of all, there's one very important concept in economics that I wish I had learned already before I studied medicine. It's the concept of sunk cost fallacy. And there's this tendency that when we invested in something, we keep to continue throwing good money after bad money. We keep to continue investing in it because we've done it in the past. So a lot of people would say, well, I already studied medicine. I already did 3 years of clinical training. Now, because of that past investment in time, and money, frankly, I need to invest further and finish it. That's kind of a logic. It's the same logic as if you would go to an all-you-can-eat pizza and you pay 25 quid, and then you realize after the third slice, actually, I'm not hungry, or the pizza actually doesn't taste that good. But because you paid in the past, you keep shoving it into your face, right? And you get more and more miserable, but you owe it to your previous investment. And that is a fallacious logic, because no matter what you do, you will not get that money back. And you made that decision at a point where you thought it was a smart idea, right? But what you should be doing is, after every time that you can make a new decision, is ask yourself, do I now want, independent of the past, to invest 1 more year in my training and in my clinical training? And that question you can only answer with 2 other pieces of information. Number 1 is, where do you actually want to go to? And number 2 is, what are my alternatives? So in other words, what are my opportunity costs to do that? And for example, if it takes you another 2 years to get that specialty, in these 2 years, you could do a master's in computer science or biomedical informatics. You could do an MBA. You could get more practical experience somewhere. You could publish stuff on the side. There's so many things you can do, and these will have several impacts. So one impact is on the learning, of course. The other one is on your sleep schedule. Then there's another one on your nutrition, on your sports, on your friendship, on all the domains of your life, right? And then the question is, how much am I willing to sacrifice for this? The question that David is asking, especially, is about this: where does it lead me? Am I missing out on opportunities in the future? I think you might. Honestly, there might be situations where they say, no, we want a GP, a specialist in whatever, with that specific experience. But at the same time, I'm very confident that there will be so many roles that you might find interesting that don't care. Or maybe they will say, yeah, we need a specialist, but actually we're looking for a gynecologist, and then you did GP. So you can't really make it right for everybody. You will have to narrow yourself down a little bit. But usually what's much more attractive is complementary skills. It's the ability to connect your medical experience to somebody else's knowledge, for example, to that of a machine learning engineer, which means that your data science skills will become more important than another year or two in medical practice. Or you want to connect it for an investor, which means that your financial skills become much more important. And in my case, they actually said to me, please don't finish your residency, because we don't want you to have status quo bias. We are annoyed by all these doctors who've been in there too long and don't have the mental flexibility. So for us, it would be a disadvantage. And also, if we need like somebody with a big name in a certain specialty, we're going to hire that person as an advisor. And I just need you to manage them. So it's always a bit about how can people solve the problem. And if you manage it well, then I don't think you will have issues. In my case right now, we're developing a device to detect diseases in the breath. It uses a multimodal artificial intelligence, which connects different sensors and so on. And now I have been asked to, in order to stay in the role of a chief medical officer also in the future, to make sure that I also have enough scientific research around the topic of breath analysis and multimodal AI. And that is something I can just very easily do on the side by publishing and working with other researchers. And that's all they require me. They don't need me to be an ENT specialist or a pneumologist or I don't know, whatever. And had I done psychiatry now as a specialty, they would not care at all, right?
I must intervene here, sorry, as a GP.
Go ahead.
David, how far are you in your training? That's, I think, important question. Thank you.
So I qualified in 2018. So I did my 2 years foundation training, and then effectively I worked at an SHO level for 3.5 years, and then made the switch in November to a full-time job in health tech.
Right. So you actually haven't started GP training?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That really depends. If you like, year and a half in it, you'd better be finishing it. But if you haven't, that wouldn't be necessarily the case. The climate in general practice is not great. I'm not entirely convinced that you have to be a consultant on GP to take those roles. Honestly, like Sven said, there are certain disadvantages to it. So you wouldn't. The longer you're in your career, the less flexible I think you are. There's more things that you need to unlearn. I don't want to discourage you from taking, training in general practice and GP, and I would encourage you to do so if you have inclination. But if you already started to do it, things in health tech, it may be skilling here, doing some degree course or training. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you both.
So now, Jenny, we're getting to your question. And Victor, you've already given her some tips, I hear. The question is, very experienced as a GP partner for 8 years in the UK, has a genuine interest in moving into health tech, maybe in parallel continuing some clinical work. has it clear which therapy areas she's interested in, but now the question is, how can I use my business experience to my advantage? So I guess by business experience, you mean in the context of the GP practice, right? Or have you done some other business stuff?
No, I just mean in the context of having a GP partner. Yeah.
Okay. No. Okay. And so the question is, how can I turn that experience? How can I position it in a way that it will be attractive to people outside? Okay. Victor, do you want to repeat your tips on LinkedIn or?
I don't think so. There were very specific tips there. I think, what actually we arrived at, because we started this conversation earlier, and I suggested to Jenna, because the question was, how can I actually apply for those jobs if they want me to have this business experience, which I don't have. And I think you can, for those who are not from UK, GP partner is an owner of practice. So there is business side to it. So it's not like purely clinical job where you actually only see patients, but you are co-owner of the business, kind of. And so we arrived, at this juncture that this is kind of experience. Obviously, it's not, you can't compare it, to running your flower shop or something like this, where you completely are only dedicated to business, but you're involved in certain bits of finance, planning, HR, and so on. So think about those things that are done by parts a business experience. I don't know what else you would advise.
So I think what I said to Nina earlier applies to you too, is do research by looking at what are people looking for. The biggest or most important thing is understand the language of the people that you intend to work with. And by language, I mean the vocabulary, of course, but I also mean how do they express things. And I can actually send you a guide on this, how to write cover letters and CVs in a business context. So please feel free to connect afterwards. The one thing is they love quantified stuff, right? So you could, for example, say how much money, what was the turnover per year in terms of money? How many expensive assets did you have to manage? By assets, I mean, maybe, I don't know, there's an ultrasound device. What's the volume of patients you cared for? How many people did you manage? Was there any growth, which could mean from 800 patients to 1,200 in X amount of time? Something like that. Or did you establish, for example, a quality management system by ISO 9001? Were there certain audits that need to be done? Did you do anything with regards to improving the patient journey because you implemented a new type of software or some I don't know, something that showed that you managed something to do something better? Did you manage to reduce waiting times from an average of 60 minutes to 40 minutes? Whatever it is, but all of these things show that there's some managerial skill that is in a way quantifiable and outcome oriented. That's generally quite good. You can also look into partnerships with other hospitals, etc., or any other type of external validation that you can get. Been mentioned in the news, got some recognition by some official body. Whatever you can throw in. There's a big tendency of inflating these things massively outside of medicine. You don't need to do that, but just like using these sort of validation points to add credibility to it will be quite good. And if you've done that, and then you looked at what are the type of words people are looking for. So for example, a commonly sought after skill is digital transformation, right? If you find that a lot in the roles that you're interested in, then preferably that also appears in your list, right? So you could say, conducted a digital transformation program by using an online booking tool to reduce waiting times from an average of 55 minutes to 48, whatever it is, something like that. But make sure that the relevant keywords somehow appear. There are different types of people who review CVs, and one type is sort of this Q seeker who's looking for specific green flags or for specific keywords. Well, it's all described in that document. I can send that to you, but I think that's basically outlines the key strategies that I would use there. And also explaining some things, right? Like, people will not know necessarily the different procedures that you've done and how complicated that can be and how long it takes. So take a bit of an extra side sentence or something in brackets to give a quick explanation, without bragging, of course, but that kind of also makes it explicit that this is a little bit of a rare skill or something special that you've been doing.
Yeah, you can dig out some old audits or something and, translate it into, we managed to convert X number of patients from expensive inhaler into cheaper one. And by that, we reduced expenses of NHS and so on. So I think Sven gave pretty good idea today how to kind of highlight things that you already did, just put them in numbers and then translate them into some kind of more quantifiable outcomes.
That's super helpful. Thank you. I'm just making lots of notes as we speak.
You'll get the transcript also, right? If you like.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
I would love to ask a question for both of you. What's your view on accelerator programs, of which there are many different types? The Zinc one is one I've been looking at recently. Also the Norsken and Birdhouse. How do you see these in terms of how useful are they? I've heard quite mixed feedback from people that have been on these programs, and I ultimately decided not to go for the Zinc program. Or not to proceed with my application for the May entry that just closed. But yeah, I would love to know what you feel about them.
I'll leave it with you, Sven. I have zero experience with accelerators.
Generally, as a doctor, it can be quite nice because you will be probably the only one, just generally speaking. Then the individual accelerators have high variation in quality. And I would only go for the ones that are really top tier, if it's possible, because often then you just get regurgitated stuff that you could also just watch on YouTube, and you're surrounded by people that you probably don't want to found with. I don't want to generalize, but there's a very strong selection bias, and many of the really strong founders don't go into this because they've already sorted. And they don't want to give up a lot of equity for something where they don't see so much value. So that being said, there are good ones. And the one thing that I would be very cautious of is the ones where they say, you join, you'll meet people, and then you'll meet your co-founders. In brackets, you have to meet them really fast because otherwise we kick you out. I can't say the name now because we're recording it, but there are some you will notice, and I think finding the right person to found with is just like finding a life partner and you're getting married, and it can be worse to break up with a company if you have investors and everything than breaking up with children sometimes, or just being married. So be very careful about that. Undoing a co-founder setting that is formalized in a company with investors can be a horrible experience, and that's all that matters in the beginning. Because frankly, you might have an idea, you might have some initial product or something like that. What you really have is just a team with a big vision, and so the team is what matters. And you will, in all likelihood, change your vision quite a few times. That being said, if you have the time, if there's something that's appealing, and if people told you specifically about these programs that they liked them, I would really ask alumni or people who are currently on the program. And it could be worth it because it's a very good educational journey if it's done well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the kind of the boot camp first few months is the part that seems really valuable. Yeah. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of downsides in terms of the cliff edges and the low percentage of people proceeding. So yeah, interesting to get your view. Thank you.
Pleasure. There's H. Rasul. So you learned to code with a view to found a healthcare startup at some point, and the question is that possible to do at half-time with clinical work alongside this? Currently, he's out of training, so he has quite some time, but might want to go back into CCT. It depends on your startup. It depends on the CCT you're going through. Generally, the answer would be probably this is not going to work out for a couple of reasons. You will have to be very flexible. There will be appointments that come in short notice or that will come in during the day, and you cannot ask everybody to meet with you on the weekend or when you're post-call or in the evenings or in the very early mornings. That will be a very practical challenge. You will have a team. You will need a team in all likelihood, and they will lose their patience at some point too. Unless you say, I'm not taking a lot of equity in the company, you have most of it, and you're turning yourself into some sort of an advisor, that could work. Depending on how clinical the whole thing is and how much time they need from you, eventually they will need somebody to do it full time. Now, in the beginning, often the chief medical officer role is not necessarily needed all in full time, but then you need somebody who takes the CEO role and so on. The second red flag I would have is that you're learning to code. You could do, of course, it's fun to learn to code. I'm not sure how valuable that is in the future, because more and more with LLMs, probably there's a big renowned professor from Harvard who said it's the end of coding. We will not need it anymore very soon, maybe in a couple of years. Of course, that's subject to debate, but it's probably not the skill I would invest myself in right now. And then you should have somebody who's really good at it and not you, right? It's cool if you can talk to them at eye level, but don't be the one coding. Focus on your strength, especially if you're doing it half-time. If you ever get into a situation where you need money in terms of venture capital funding, investors will probably view this as a big blocker for two reasons. One is you will not have enough time. And the second one is they will ask if you don't really believe in it. And if it's just a little enjoyment project that you will drop the minute something becomes hard. And that's too risky for them. They want to see your full-time commitment, usually.
I think we've got like recurrent theme here about finishing your training or not.
Yeah.
So that really depends where you are in your journey. So I think if you're somewhere past the half of it, it might be still worth doing it. I think this what Sven highlighted here about coding and getting being treated seriously, it's important. So it's pretty good to know how to code if you want to be involved in this part of the market. But there's a lot of people who actually are only doing that and are very experienced. So it would be maybe more as an advantage to have it on your CV that you have some foundation of Python or whatever you're learning, rather than execute that yourself full time and coding. I think it's this train left already, I think.
May I chip in a bit with the experience as well? I guess I've been silent because I did this step 7 years ago, and I've had the privilege of going to a large international pharma, and then afterwards to a state-run organization. And one thing that I found quite helpful that colleagues need to realize is that the moment you're moving from clinical career, you're actually moving into a big business world. And the big business world actually works mostly on the Excel tables. So as soon as something becomes red, they need to chip off 10% of the work power. And this is not a situation you would have in your practice or in your hospital, because this just doesn't happen. And there is no saying if you're there or not in that laying off quota, But I would second that what Victor said. If you are with your training somewhere meaningful and you can hold it out, no matter what happens to you, you'll always be a specialist later on, and you can always revive that and actually earn your bread with it if something goes wrong. So we are seeing now with the digital health startups that had a huge uplift in the last 3 or 4 years, that more and more are failing because these solutions are not adopted into the systems really how it was expected, also from the investor side. This is a huge challenge that is only partially starting to be put into a framework, not really solved. So there will be a very difficult time still coming up. But if you have the curiosity to do it, do it. This is, for me, it was an amazing learning experience. I still have no idea where I will end up, but it's something that is really rewarding in itself to satisfy your curiosity that you have as a physician. And this is something that has no price. You're just the way you are. And of course, there are risks with it. This is fine. But also beware of, this is something that Sven also said in a few times, what I've come when interviewing for different positions is that the recruiters and the companies, the people that are doing the recruitment, they still have not most of them have not had the privilege of coming to a position to start to look at people being more broad than for the specific roles that they look for. So trying to sell yourself as somebody as an integrator or a central communication point, because this is what most companies that do also devices don't have. They don't have the people that can understand the language of very specific niches that is needed. And this is maybe the best what translates in my experience is that the medical affairs department, for which you as doctors, physicians are mostly qualified for, this is that the very few health tech companies these days still even have, and most of them are not even aware that they actually need that. So this is something where I see the biggest wave of interest and potential roles coming up, and this is where it actually helps that you have a broad clinical background. But the moment that they hear you've been doing this and that, you're a bit of a fluttering from this to that side, and this is really not something they feel very comfortable with, because they have no idea if you will just not go in 2 months to another role once when your curiosity is all fed up. So I'm sorry, I did not meant to hijack the session, just a bit of my 5 cents into the story, what I've witnessed across the last years.
Thank you for that. It's really good to hear, your experience, your lived experience. Yeah, so I think it's even more helpful to in this kind of question.
No, truly appreciate it, and 100% second everything you said. Thanks. We have Timo sharing something quite personal also, which I truly appreciate. So you're saying that you started a startup as a side hustle. There was lack of time, a few results. You got fired after a few months. I assume that's from your side hustle, right? And you feel frustrated now because that's not an option anymore. How do you keep motivated with this scheduling, the balance between the job and then the side hustle? That goes to my earlier point. I think just side hustling in general is really, really hard. The type of side hustles that I find work really well, if you just want a side hustle and you want to explore the field, have some fun, have some other opportunities, I think I would have a couple of criteria for the side hustle. And number one is, it's not an issue if you suddenly don't have time for a while. If that's just a week or 3, it shouldn't throw the side hustle off balance. The other thing is, I would probably do something that is going towards a product rather than a service, because products can scale up and you don't need to scale it up with your own time, which is already quite limited. And then the other part, it should be with people that have a lot of self-drive and that you trust, or it's something that you can really do by yourself, which is rarely the case. But it has to be people who are highly self-motivated and can also manage themselves and work without too much coordination, because you might not have the time to do that. And then if people drop, then you will be frustrated and it will take up your nerves. And it should have a potential for an upside that is disproportionate to the work you're putting in. And frankly, that can be something super simple, as, for example, writing a book. Right? Nothing happens if you don't continue writing the book for a couple of weeks. But if you put it up, our margin on each of these books that we're selling is 11 euro. Sorry, I need to do nothing. Right? It's just uploaded and that's it. It sells globally, so somebody can order it in the US or in Australia. That's it. I have a card game for doctors. There, the margin is only. Sorry, I'm going to cough for a second. Really annoying Berlin bug going on here. Yeah, so the card game, 6 euro margin. It's not massive, but it sells automatically. Amazon sends me a message every time they send out a game, and then once a month they wire me money. And that's gratifying because even if I don't have time, I will get reminded with a paycheck, although I haven't done anything for it. And so then you don't have to consume that money, but then you can start to use it to hire people to do something that you couldn't do. For example, to improve the web page, do marketing for you, hire an influencer to put something out, like get other people to do stuff by using the money that you made through this and thereby try to scale it. And there's so much you can do and you learn a lot from it. Like every time you hire somebody who's good at something, that's also a skill, learning how to hire the right people. It will advance you somehow. Or you could produce videos on YouTube, or, there's so many things where it just keeps on going, even if you don't do anything. And every time you have time, you can contribute to it. And it's also okay if things aren't perfect in the beginning, right? So I'm starting with YouTube right now. My promise to myself is that every video has to do one thing better than the previous ones. And I accept imperfection a lot. And it's really painful for me to upload things because I'm embarrassed. But I'm just forcing myself to do it. And I'm watching a lot of videos on how to do it right. And then every time I'm learning. I'm doing the post-production myself so that I have to listen to all my ums and ahs and see how often I have my finger in my face or both. But I'm getting there, right? And that's kind of the process. So yeah, these would be my things. I wouldn't do something if you honestly ask yourself, how much is it a service part? How much should you be doing it full-time for real? How strong are the people that you're working with? If you got fired, the question is also, who are these people, right? Whether the right people to found it with and so on. I don't know enough, but generally from talking to people, I think if it's going to be a side hustle, these are things to consider.
I'll maybe just few words. So first of all, to keep up your motivation, you may try to reframe what happened, because it looks like you look at that as a failure. I think you're quite a successful person. If you compare yourself to other peers, how many people actually work in startup like you? Then obviously, there's a team of people. You never are responsible for everything. So if it failed, I don't know details, how much it was, of your making actually. And in terms of having a side hustle, I think it's a kind of process of a part of the process of transitioning. So I think, where you were, you probably should have make more kind of decided step into this health tech or startup job like full time. If that was an option, sometimes it's a difficult decision, it might be kind of scary and so on. But I think, look at it as a how many benefits already and how many, try to find learning points from it. And I think you're kind of, your kind of competitors who never been actual in a startup, they're only looking into that and applying to those jobs.
Thanks a lot. Much appreciated.
Okay. Any more questions?
Hello, everyone. I'm from Hannover, Germany. And it's great to hear from everybody and the journeys they're in. So I'm still a medical student. So all of this applies to me at some point in the future. But at the moment, the reason I'm interested to hear from everyone is because it's really frustrating to see all the doctors, and they are all really unhappy about their situation. It's so sad as a student because I'm in my last year of my studies, so I will finish them, of course, but it's sad to see that the last year is going to waste because I can count on one hand how many happy doctors I've seen in the hospital I'm at, and everybody complains about the same things, but they are not changing their career and they are working and working because that's just the way it is. And because I'm not sure where to take my career outside the hospital, and I want to start as a doctor. That's I'm certain to do that, but I'm not sure what specialty to start in because I'm not sure if I want to do like a health tech startup or consulting. I'm sorry, I didn't speak English like since high school. What specialty is important for people outside the hospital? Does it matter if you do anesthesia or internal medicine or surgery? Does it matter at all? Or what skills are people outside the hospital interested in?
I think we had this question last time, something similar about from student from UK, and he was asking pretty similar questions, including should he finish actually the medical course. So I would personally encourage you to finish the course. And I don't know the German training, but I understand there is something similar to UK where you need to work a year or two in a hospital to be like qualified as a doctor. Is that right?
Kind of. So
kind of.
For Sven, I'm still a student, but ich weiß nicht, welche Assistenzarzt-Fachrichtung man anfängt. I don't know what the English terms are.
I got your question. So I think a couple of thoughts on this. Number one, a big mistake that we doctors often tend to do, I believe, is we try to find the end goal and reverse engineer from that. It seems very logical, but there are two big problems with it. If you get there, you might realize you don't like it. That's what most doctors are in at the moment, for reasons that you can't control, right? Because how would you know until you got there? And the second part is, even if you like it, I don't want to bring up that big topic, but I mean, we all know how short a life can be. We've seen it, right? Or something else gets in your way. So you might not even get there. And that makes another question much more important, I think, which is, will you enjoy the journey? Like maybe the whole world needs more anesthesiologists and startups, but you really don't like it. Don't do it. It's going to make your life miserable. I would choose whatever you find most exciting at the moment. I went into lung diseases, frankly, in a very unemotional manner, because I thought the lung is one of the biggest contributor to the global burden of disease, according to WHO. If you look at the top 10 diseases, then the heart is also part of it, but I'm going to cover that in my training. Plus, aerogenous germs make up for a big public health policy topic, and I also have a public health degree and a public policy degree. So I was just I was doing the Hollywood approach. I was kind of like, he was like, I don't know. I certainly don't want to be in clinical care forever. So I'm going to try to position myself where I believe I can be seen or where I can be most useful. And then I also chose Berlin as a location because it's a big startup scene. There's politics. I thought I'm just going to be around in the right place and be found. By Hollywood approach, I mean, if you want to become an actor or an actress, don't hang out in Wyoming, right? Just go hang out in Hollywood, because that's where you're most likely to get casted. And so that was kind of my thinking. But I also knew that I would enjoy that journey because it was in a hospital where a friend of mine worked, and I knew the team was great and the boss was fun. And so I knew, at worst case scenario, I'm going to have fun. And I had the best support I could get. And many of the opportunities that came up were because this boss knew what my dream was and was doing his best to make it happen. So that was important. Number two, doctors are, I've always had that, and they try to stop you. They tell you, please, you can still stop, do something else. They made their decision for themselves, and they made it for good reasons. And I know a lot of people who did not study medicine, and they constantly tell me these things like, oh, I wish I was a doctor. I think I would have been. Do you think I would be a good doctor? Maybe I should study medicine now. MIT has this 4-year program. I'm like, bro, you're 42 years old. You're not going to go to medical school and then be an intern at 46. Like, that's don't, why? And now you don't have to go through that phase of regret. And we always regret the things we didn't do more than we did. Not always, I guess, but for most of the things. So that's important for your own peace of mind, right? To normalize that part that you kind of admired as a profession. That's great. And it's a privilege that you can do it now. And the final thought is I would really widen my lens. It sounds like you're hanging out with a lot of doctors, and so you are in an echo chamber, and they can only give you advice on the external things from a perspective of ignorance, without meaning that in a judgmental way. But it would be much better for you to hang out with people who went to Boston Consulting Group or who actually work there. Or if you can do an internship there, I'm sure they would love you. If you go on the webpage of McKinsey and of BCG, they constantly have like these weekend trips or week-long workshops. They specifically want what they call the exotics, which are people like yourself who don't come from a typical business background. And then you can hang out, you can party with them. There will be a big partner, whatever. You could talk to them and you will get a first feeling for it. And I would hang out with people who work in venture capital, who invest. Maybe you never heard that word, but it's a full profession, which is actually quite interesting. Maybe you can go to startup meetups and just hang around. Just be like, hey, I'm a doctor. I know this is not even a health tech startup meetup. It's for green tech or whatever. But just have a drink with them and see what they talk about. And if you enjoy it, and ask them questions and so on and so on. And I think that then will naturally make a few things better for you. And sometimes it's okay to also just listen to your intuition, or maybe you run into people that you find personally really cool and want to spend time with them. You find them inspiring for one reason, and maybe that's enough of a reason to go into that path for the time being, and then find your career over there. If you play this whole thing right, and you keep learning and growing and positioning yourself and exposing yourself to other people, opportunities will come in a way that you cannot see right now. And that's another thing also, maybe going to Timo also. I see a lot of people who want to be a founder. I want to have my startup, and then they go out and it's like really forced. And I've validated so many ideas and all that, and I have to find something. I'm giving myself 3 more months, and if I then don't have it, then I'm just never going to be a founder. And there's so much pressure. And then you talk to them 2 months later, yeah, I found it. And then they come up with this idea, and you're like, oh my God, this is super stupid. It's not valuable to anybody. And it's just it's so clear that they just want to really do something, and then the actual topic comes second. And what for me worked much better is if suddenly there's this engineer who comes up and he says, I've been working on this technology for 10 years. I think I can detect diseases in the breath. I need your help because it's a medical thing and I don't know anything about it. Do you want to team up? Should we build this? And I'm like, yeah, amazing, right? But then there's like a real thing, a lot that needs to be done still. Super risky, but there's somebody who came with a passion, who created something, and now you come together, and it's like dating, right? You can really, I want to be in a relationship now, and then you force it, and chances are it's probably not going to work, or you wait for the moment when it feels right, and then you invest yourself really into it, right?
Thanks. it's really useful to hear your thoughts.
I would maybe add only. I probably will second what Sven was saying about don't get surrounded by sad, unhappy people only. Try to reach out, and I'm sure there are doctors who are happy in their jobs. Not everyone is unhappy. Most of us are, but not everyone. And in terms of choosing a specialty, I would say as a bit of a gamble, if you're already thinking about doing some kind of outside job, health tech job, it's impossible to guess what would help you. So if you decide to pursue, specialty at all, just do what you're interested in. Don't look from point of view of health tech, because 2 years ago, no one actually paid attention to AI and ChatGPT and such things. We don't know what's going to happen next year. So don't focus from that point of view on choosing specialty. I don't know about Germany, but I'm sure there are some career coaches, and if you struggle with choosing specialty, this might be worth exploring to find out what are actually your values, what are important things to you, and from then on move into choices that you're going to make. Right, Roy?
Yes.
Yes, you're breaking
You
up.
raise your
Maybe
hand.
just one more thing that also I think colleagues need to know. Yes. What we need to know is that we are a bit different in terms of we are not trained in business. And businesses usually want straightforward answers, want hype, want whatever needs to have the idea sold and so on. As a clinician or as a medicine person, in medicine, 1 and 1 is very rarely 2. And you just need to then be sure when you are actually giving your advice that you make it, and this was already said by Sven and Victor, that you actually make it understandable for them, because they don't have that much experience. When you ask a question in the clinics, you will always say, yes, this is how it usually happens, but then this can happen and that can happen and so on. And they want really straightforward answers. And this is also something that requires a bit of adaptation on how we've been trained to communicate and express ourselves. Businesses are not medicine, and they don't really understand that. It's not that they don't appreciate, but they don't understand that. So this is where you can then get, there can be a miscommunication and failure in expectations on both sides. So this is something that you also need to be aware of.
Thank you.
Welcome.
To build on that, so I took a really nice program in Cambridge on entrepreneurship, and the very first lecture was about, basically they were congratulating all of us and flattering, and you made it, blah 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 blah. And then they said, however, as much as you should be proud of yourselves, there's one thing we need to tell you. We know you came here to learn a lot of things, and we're happy to teach you, but much more important than this is that you start to figure out the things that you need to unlearn, because in all likelihood, many of the traits and successes you've had that made you be here today are going to stand in your way for where you want to go next. And the problem is that is much harder to teach, and it's much harder to generalize. So these are the things that probably you need to figure out yourself. We can give you nudges here and there and reflections. And I think that really pays into, how do I pronounce your name? I don't want to mispronounce it. So
it's Hrvoje. Like ein Herr, like wie ein Herr und dann Voje. Hrvoje.
Okay. So what you said, thank you, is just one example of that, right? So in medicine, you are successful if you can lead within ambiguity, if you can bear the pain of managing through uncertainty. And then suddenly people expect you to create certainty when really there isn't quite so much, even less sometimes. And that's just one of a lot of examples. So hunting for these things is super important. And Torben, that is yet another reason why I think it's super important to spend a lot of time with these people and then pretend that you are an anthropologist, somebody who's participating to get a feeling for this. Listen, not just to what they say, but how they say it, when they say it, what they don't say. And really, like when I took my driving lesson, I kept missing the signs, and I was speeding and not stopping and everything. And I said to my teacher, so I don't know why, but I just don't see the signs. And he said one simple thing. He's like, yeah, you shouldn't wait for them to pop into your eye. You have to actively search for them. And once I did that, I never missed a sign again in my life. And that's an approach that I take when I go somewhere where there's a different setting, a different culture, whatever it's sort of a national culture or a professional culture or whatever culture. And I try to hunt for these signs that are there and that are not there. And then sort of get myself into that vibe. And the more you practice doing that, the faster, the easier it will be for you to blend into another environment, as has just been described.
Okay, last questions. If anyone wants to come forward. If not, I think we can maybe wrap up quickly. Thank you all for coming to this call, workshop, whatever you call it. We hope you had some benefit of it. Thanks for asking questions. That was really helpful for us. You didn't have to listen to any sob stories of ours. So thanks for that. That's also helpful for us. This is recorded. You will have access to that probably in a couple of weeks. And you can watch it again or whatever. Sven?
I just second that. Thank you so much. That was fun. And reach out if there are more questions.
Yeah, you have our details. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.